This FedGov Today program is sponsored by Dell Technologies and Carasoft. On this special edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, the new Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Daryl Caudle's first long-form TV interview as CNO. First, though, this FedGov Today program is the premiere show on the American Forces Network. Each week on FedGov Today TV, you'll meet leaders who are driving the business of the federal government. To everyone watching on base, on ships at sea, and embassies around the world, welcome aboard. The Navy's Chief Technology Officer, Justin Finelli, tells FedGov Today 5 technology areas will be his priorities for future investments. Suri Durvasula is Vice President of Federal for Dell Technologies. He tells me what the Navy will gain by making those technologies what he calls people first.
Enabling the warfighter to be able to make decisions more quickly, is an obvious sort of, outcome of people first and technology sort of working together, the technology and people working together. There's another aspect of it, which is the, sort of the emotional side of it, right? People are connected to the outside world, the ability to connect ships and shipboard systems back to the internet, which sounds, sort of a strange thing to say today, given that everything's connected to the internet, but that's the reality. The ability for us to increase the morale of the ship members, the warfighters, such that they're able to do what they need to and be ready at a moment's notice is really key. There's a lot of decision making that's happening now. Everything is technology enabled. And as we look at the technologies that are out there, the ability for us to make rapid decisions and use technology to then aid the warfighter in making those decisions. Everything from repairing parts quickly to getting the right ammunition loaded into the gun, wherever it needs to be, getting the ship to the right level of the carrier, taking care of our assets, but getting the soldier always ready with the right amount of decision-making ability and data is a key aspect of where technology and people come together to enable all the actions that we need to take place at a moment's notice.
All the leaders that I talk to across all the services talk to me on a regular basis about how they're integrating technology for readiness. What are the opportunities that you see coming over the horizon for that?
Dell's very involved, for example, in the flank speed program, which the Navy's deployed shipboard. It allows us to enable technologies that we use every day, such as Office 365, but use it on a shipboard system. It's amazing. The Navy hosted their first Teams call for an all hands, and the idea that you could do that shipboard is just a different aspect. So again, there's that one aspect of just traditional capabilities being available at a moment's notice. But then there's other things, for example, disconnected logistics and the ability to source parts across the fleet at a moment's notice to make sure that the F-18 can get back up in the air, as an example, is a key aspect of where the more we can get connected and the more we can bring data together, the more we'll have our team members ready to go.
How can the service members that you deal with, what should they be thinking about now that's coming over the horizon? Maybe isn't available to them today technology-wise, but it's right around the corner.
5G, while it's something that we all see on our phones, is really going to be an enabler to helping innovate the supply chain. And when you think of military operations, it truly is a supply chain. And so the ability to connect a lot of different sensors together, allow for the data that comes off of those sensors to then rapidly be analyzed, but then also deploying the right assets and getting the right information to the service member is going to be key to then making sure that enablement happens. We do this every day in the commercial world, right? So you think of any retail, large, hardware supply or otherwise, they're doing everything from having, enhanced experience at the actual shelf where they're evaluating different paint colors, et cetera, all the way down to, purchases that are being made or then notifying the supply chain that we need to pull forward. that technology, it's readily available in the commercial space. It needs to be enabled throughout, the military as a whole. I also think there's a huge opportunity for, the technology that's being used in one area of the organization to then be leveraged elsewhere. The government has a program called CHEETAS through the Test Resource Management Center, and through TRMC, that capability will allow for rapid analytics to come right off of any fighter jet or what have you, to be able to then give warfighter essential information. Why isn't that leveraged everywhere, right? As we think of all the capabilities that are out there and all the different sensors that are out there, what else, can we use that technology to go do?
Suri Durvasula of Dell Technologies. You can read more on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, the first long-form TV conversation with the new Chief of Naval Operations. Admiral Daryl Caudle is next when FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.
How do we solve our nation's biggest challenges? Precision, speed, honor. No manual, no roadmap, no problem. Launching AI in orbit, using XR on the battlefield. Stopping fentanyl at the border, making America stronger, safer, faster. It's who we are and how we lead. Booz Allen, it's in our code.
And we're partnered with our HR folks, not just for the training and upskilling of folks, but I think it also allows us to see where we have training gaps with our staff. We look at training AI models like we would train an employee, right? The same upkeep and training you would have to do to make an employee successful, you have the same effort for the AI. And we think that's going to help inform where we have those training gaps for our staff so they can be more effective, and where do we need to upskill and train them based on those gaps.
It's not a secret that we have less resources today than we did in the past. We have fewer people, our budgets are smaller. So how do we take advantage of these technologies to overcome that and create the more efficient government that we've been talking about for many years? And, what Daryl's doing, what other agencies are doing are definitely demonstrating that it's possible. I think the challenge that we're going to have as a federal IT community is to continue the momentum. And as we encounter challenges, because there's always challenges with these technologies, let's, as a community, figure out ways to overcome these and continue to push forward.
Welcome back. The Navy will cancel 4 Constellation frigates out of 6 it was planning to buy. The Secretary of the Navy, John Phelan, says, quote, a key factor in this decision is the need to grow the fleet faster to meet tomorrow's threats. In part 1 of his first long-form TV interview as Chief of Naval Operations, I asked Admiral Daryl Caudle about the future of the fleet. In having spoken to several of your predecessors, the focus for a long time has been on the size of the fleet and the trajectory that the size of the fleet is on. I've noted in your confirmation hearing, in your communications with the fleet since becoming CNO, that you've focused on a different idea. You're focusing on what you've called the ideal Navy. What's the composition and what's the capability, in your view, of the ideal Navy, Admiral?
Well, Francis, first, thank you for this interview and thanks for taking the time. And there's a lot of studies out there. Some of this is even legislated on how big the Navy will be. You can see numbers like 355 ships, 381 ships. But our build rate and our decommissioning rate has been pretty much equal for quite a while. So the Navy is held at about 300 or so ships for a long time. So I don't see that fundamentally changing in my time. So instead of focusing on that absolute number, I do think it's important to focus on what the Navy needs to be able to do. And our adversaries get a vote on that. Our combatant commanders, to meet the risk that they are incurring, get a vote on that. And so the Navy I want to field is one that can meet those demands globally, to protect our sea lines of communication, our commerce, the choke points of the world, to be ready to execute prompt and sustained combat operations in our most stressing operational plans, but at the end of the day is one that is not only ready but sustainable and has the right mix of high-end combat ships, high-end aircraft, and of course unmanned autonomous vehicles that actually can deliver the actual lethality required to win. And so to me, much more important than giving some number is the readiness of that Navy, my ability to integrate into the joint force, my ability to integrate with allies and partners in an effective way, and to sustain that through the actual readiness that the Navy needs to be effective globally, sir.
What's the delta between the Navy that you have today and the vision that you just outlined?
Well, I think it's the delta really turns into the priorities that I've set. And those priorities are with the foundry and the fleet and then the way we fight. And the foundry comprised of all the infrastructure, the material and the people, the total force. And that means all the sailors, our civilians, and our contractors, and the folks that are supporting me have to be right. The infrastructure is part of that as well. And of course the material, the supply parts and things necessary that I consume and that I need to actually sustain that Navy form the fundamental delta. And the emphasis that I'm putting on that, as you've seen with the products I put out, first and foremost, and I think it's in keeping with all Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies, is they put their people first. At the center of all my problem sets, the thing that matters to me most are our sailors. And I've recognized in my time and as a flag officer and throughout my career that by emphasizing the people, then that ends up being the actual thing that helps all other lines of effort. So I am unapologetically making sure sailors are first in my campaign.
Sailors First is the title of C-Note number 1, the first message that you sent to the fleet. And I read item number 3, I've directed your Navy leadership to take the steps necessary to ensure that, all capital letters, no sailor will live afloat. Why is that important, and why is that near the top of your list of priorities?
Well, I've always found that, sailors report to a ship. They spend at least 50% of that first assignment on a ship. And the last thing I want them to do when it comes back to port is not be able to leave the ship and have a home. I think it's an antiquated idea. So I'd like for people to live and work in different places. I think of myself as a young 18-year-old in college. If I was on a ship, I want to have a relationship with, a girlfriend. I want to be able to have somewhere I can sit and talk with my friends. So I think that needs to be separate from the ship. And just structurally, since the beginning of our Navy, and this is really lands predominantly with our surface Navy, our aviation community and our submarine community and our information warfare community. No one else lives on board the platform in which they work every day. So this is a young surface sailor problem, is I think they deserve to have that separated. Imagine an 8-9 month deployment on board a ship, and you get back to Norfolk or San Diego, and you know that your home is still on that ship. It's just not right. And so we are working hard to get all sailors a place to live and putting a lot of emphasis on the quality of those places as well. About 7,000 or so remain. We've moved off about 2,500, and that's been some great help from Congress, who has given me some expanded authorities to give BAH, or Basic Allowance for Housing, to E4s and E3s or whoever needs that. So as I bring sailors off the ship and put them into housing, I can move more sailors into the communities. And doing that is not as easy as I thought it would be, but the team working that is getting after it, and I'm not going to stop till that number's 0.
Do you, what will you need to do, and what will your team need to do resource-wise to be able to accomplish that goal?
In certain areas, we have the housing to do that. So it's going to happen quick. In certain places, and that can be overseas, and some of our forward deployed naval forces, think Japan and perhaps Rhoda, and some of the places like that, the ability to move ashore is not quite as easy, but I'm getting after it. And so it's not equal, but I want every sailor that's listening to this today to know that I'm going to eventually get you off that ship, and we're going to get great quality housing for you to live in. And if you need to live in the community, we're going to make sure your BAH supports that.
Back to C-Note number 1, and I'm just going to pull a couple of things out of here, but there's a theme that I detect. Galley facilities, uniforms and sea bag, free Wi-Fi, the nav admin process. All of those things don't sound really high profile and they don't sound like tip of the spear things, why do they make it into C note number one, the first message that you send out to the fleet?
Because if you think of everything through the view of, I guess, a kill chain, if you will, at the beginning of that kill chain, really in every step throughout, its focus is on people in my mind. So I wanted to, Sailor First, be the first C note that I put out to let the Navy know that I'm not kidding about this. And these little things that have bugged me as my time as a flag officer, I wanted to come in very quickly and get after. You'll see in that C note, we've done some things to make sure sailors get paid on time. That was a big problem we identified a couple years back. So one of these, just to make sure corrective action's sticky. I want to make sure that we didn't lose anything in the effort to get people paid on time. The ability to actually log into a Wi-Fi signal, to get cell signal, especially in the shipyards. You're sitting in the barracks, and you want to actually, have decent Wi-Fi. I think that's just common philosophy in today's world. I apply a standard that my daughters who went to college, if they're visiting a college and they went into the dorm and they couldn't see a Wi-Fi signal, would that be a college I'd let them stay in? I don't think so. So why would I want sailors to not have the same amenity?
The Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Daryl Caudle, Part 2 with Admiral Caudle on FedGov Today TV next. You can see Part 3 exclusively on the FedGov Today YouTube channel. You'll get a link to that on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today with Francis Rose. We'll be back in a moment.
In our conversations, we like to talk about it in terms of speed, trust, and security. We're enabling our field commanders with the intelligence that they need as rapidly as they need it, with the balance of speed, trust, and security. So those three are really the trifecta in terms of our deliverables through this platform. So first of all, AI operations. Ingesting large amounts of data, whether it be intelligence reports, field communications, satellite imagery. All of these things are what commanders need at their fingertips and rapidly to make informed decisions. These are critical decisions in a very mission-critical environment, as you know.
Welcome back. The new Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Daryl Caudle, is promoting what he calls a sailor-first approach as CNO. He spoke about it again last week at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam in Hawaii. In Part 2 of my conversation with him at the Pentagon recently, I asked him why that approach is so important to him.
At the end of the day, Francis, we're asking sailors to go into harm's way, conduct lethal operations, to actually, be a warrior. And under, Secretary of War's, revive the warrior ethos. And you want to treat them like warriors, then we need to treat them like world-class athletes. So that goes to how we feed them, how we build toughness, how we build resiliency, the kit we give them, the place we live, to make their plane frictionless on getting to work, the tools they need to be successful, improving their competency, and then most of all, hold them accountable and pushing the expectation of authority down to them. And make that part of the ROI of the things I'm doing for them, what they owe me is to execute.
Of all the descriptors that you used there about the force that you want to build, resilience was the word that jumped out at me. What's the delta between the resilience that you see in the force today and the end state that you just described there?
It's something that requires constant attention. The forces on a human being change over time. There's an old saying, the character of war changes, but the nature of it doesn't. The character being the characteristics. It has combat kit. It has, we get underway, we're in harm's way, we're at sea. But the nature of, the actual warfare doesn't really change. And so making sure that sailors understand that nature of warfare, given the input products I have from the way they're being brought up today, the technology environment they're in, how they learn, all those things become the delta set. The courage, the boldness, the ability to adapt, and the desire to serve in something bigger than themselves, that has not changed. I don't see that at all. But some of the characteristics on that, how I get that information to them and build them into a world-class warrior has, I have to stay ahead of that. And that's how we do our training. That's how we build, our facilities. Every single aspect of actually delivering that product, if you will, a world-class warrior, has changed. And without some forethought of that and making sure I'm lead turning those initiatives to stay ahead of that, I won't deliver on that promise.
I imagine those elements that you're talking about there are the standby for what's coming next that you write about at the end of C-Note 1. Is that a fair assumption on my part?
That is fair.
What are the kinds of things that the sailor that's watching this can maybe expect to hear in C-Note 3 coming at some future point?
Well, what they're going to see is really, in C-Note 3 is going to be about the fleet. Okay, so I've given the sailor first. C-Note 2 is a lot about the foundry. In that, you saw some things about improving maintenance through our shore intermediate maintenance activities, which become a place where sailors can actually be stationed to get back to them learning their actual trade, to know how to repair ships, which ties to the self-sufficiency at sea. And I look at these SEMAs, if you will, putting one in Norfolk and San Diego, is the ultimate sea school on how to keep ships repaired. So what C-Note 3 is going to be about is how I actually kind of get that done. Our fleets are the most decisive instrument of national power. And it is how the Navy fights, through the fleet design. And so how I build a fleet, how I command and control it, and at the end of the day is how I deliver response options for the President, for the Secretary of War. And so how I budget for that, how I POM for that, how I prioritize for that, C-Note 3 will address a lot of that process.
Last time we talked was when you were still at Fleet Forces Command, and we spoke about the shipbuilding situation that the Navy finds itself in today. What can you do to drive the things that we talked about there to deliver faster, to deliver on better on budget, and so on, deliver these capabilities the way that you would like to as CNO?
Well, as CNO, what I've recognized is, and perhaps unique to my start as CNO, everyone's on the same page here. Everyone recognizes the imperative. Everyone recognizes deficiencies that we have, in particular with shipbuilding, with munitions, stockpiles not being where they should, or parts not being where they should, where gaps at sea have been plagued, our operational ability to deliver the combat power, and we've made great strides with record recruiting there. I mean, we've already met our recruiting goals for this year already, so that's much improved. But the hardest of those problems land in the industrial base, and it is the defense industrial base, the submarine industrial base, for ship building, new construction, ship repair at the depot level, munitions production. Those are some of our most wicked and challenging problems. Working very closely with the Office of Secretary of War, the Secretary of the Navy, Congress, everyone's on the same page of the problem. It's just the solution sets and the funding of that, and getting the rudder over to see measurable return on our investments has been a bit still not where I want it to be. I think at the end of that, part of that's process. Part of that is building the workforce that can actually get after that. What I see in some of our new constructions is, I think, unacceptable attrition. I see challenges in recruiting and retention. That's part of building a culture where people want to do this work. You've probably seen some of the ads we're doing where we're campaigning for this. This is a national effort, not just around the local shipyard effort. And so we need to broaden the aperture of the people we bring in. We need to build hooks into the vocational training we do, so that we get the right people at these yards to do this very sophisticated vocational craftsmanship work. And then they want to do this for a long time, so build the experience back. And then at the last, Francis, I would tell you to build a palpable sense of urgency, where there needs to be a desire to be offended if you're one day off critical path, and not be satisfied with being late, and deliver what we're contractually buying, and get the ships and capabilities, munitions, and things that I've paid for delivered. And that goes back to your first question, and what I see is the ideal fleet. It's one in which the stuff I've paid for I'm actually have and I'm operating with.
When you talk about urgency, do you emphasize that because you don't detect enough today, or are you just reinforcing what you already see?
I would say it's a little of both. I don't detect the urgency sense that I see that needs to exist given the environment I think I'm in. The complex geopolitical environments with the threats I face, I don't see the commensurate urgency across every sector of our industrial base. And I think we do need to put more effort there so that the folks that are building the things we need to deliver the combat power we need to actually understand this is no kidding high stakes poker we're playing here, if you will, and they need to be able to deliver on those contracts.
Part 2 of my conversation with the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Daryl Caudle. You can see Part 3 exclusively on the FedGov Today YouTube channel. You'll get a link to that on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.
The intelligence community has long embraced the buy versus build mentality, and long ago, dismissed the days of needing to build their own systems, and has embraced industry's leading edge solutions, especially those that are coming out of some of the emerging tech hotbeds in our country domestically, to allow them to focus more on the mission and the mission outcomes as opposed to building and deploying technology. So I think the intelligence community has long embraced and continues to embrace, like never before, a partnership with industry and industry practitioners that can understand some of that mission and mission outcomes and help them drive those outcomes by providing, the technology side of in the increasingly digital world.
You used a term a moment ago that I think makes some people skittish, and that is AI improving itself. What's the state of the art when it comes to that, and what might be able to be done to make people less skittish about that concept?
Well, that is the frontier of AI. I think a lot of what we're talking about in AI today is truly automation. When we talk about even how the Defense Department of War is using AI today is for automating workflows. They are testing inputs, getting known outputs. That's not artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is when you get that probabilistic output, and we want to preserve that. So I just think that's where the technology is going.
Welcome back. In today's event spotlight, AFCEA DC's 49th annual Winter Gala is coming to the National Building Museum. Some of the top people from the Pentagon, the national security and intelligence community, and industry will be there. It's this Friday night, December 12th. You can read more about it and register at fedgovtoday.com/events. FedGov Today TV's back next Sunday morning at 10:30. The Director of the Office of Personnel Management, Scott Cooper, will be here. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.